Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Debates. The last one was a long while back where we did a debate with Kanchanda about India and Israel. But as I always say on the Mind Debates, we are always waiting for a great topic to have a debate with, and we found one this week. So we're very pleased to have Anuraag Saxena and J. Sai Deepak, both authors, columnists, and activists, might I add. Anurag is with the India Pride Project. Sai Deepak is a lawyer by profession, and he's is an activist as well, taking up lots of causes. To know more about their activities, please refer to the podcast we did with both of them. But jokes apart, Anurag is involved with the India Pride Project, who's done Bringing Our Gods Back Home. It's a very excellent effort, and we had a detailed discussion with him. But today, specifically, what I wanted to talk to Anurag and Sai about was a campaign called Save Our Gods, and it's related to an antiquities bill that is being tabled in the Indian Parliament, if I'm not wrong, guys. And so we wanted to have a detailed discussion on it. We saw their piece on Swarajya, which was an excellent piece, and they also are doing a thunderclap campaign. So without much further ado, and in case you haven't noticed, I have my comrade Sunanda Vashisht joining me in the efforts to question them.
I was wondering what happened. I was wondering what happened. Why didn't I get introduced? Did I get...
So without further ado, I would like to introduce Anurag and just have him tell in a minute or so about what is this project about and everything. Anurag.
Well, so as you've already mentioned, Adit, a large part of my effort is spent with the India Pride Project, where we're running, a campaign and research and a whole bunch of activities to make sure that Indian heritage and temple murtis that have gotten smuggled abroad are actually brought back to India. So that's kind of the larger effort that I'm involved with. Sai Deepak, as you know, is involved with the India Collective, where they pick up a whole bunch of causes on the legal front that are important to India's cultural renaissance. The reason we've come together is that there is a new bill that is being proposed in Parliament, which actually equally offended Sai Deepak and me for multiple reasons. Two of them really stand out for me, which I just find unacceptable. One is this new bill will allow the buying and selling of Indian heritage. The second is that it will allow a government officer to basically walk into your home or into a temple or into a fort and say, "Ji, aaj se ye murti hamari ho gayi." So this particular murti is ours today. So we're running a campaign to kind of...
I have to put in one point, and I want you to expand on this government point one more, because that aspect I found the most troubling. That because what people do is when they talk about a government officer coming in, they often conflate it with, "Arey, abhi to sarkar is doing good work. We don't see this happening." But they don't realize that if this law is in place, 10 years down the lane, if there is, I don't know, I'm not saying this will happen, but koi ridiculous sarkar aa gayi, and if they want to misuse the bureaucracy this way, it could lead to disastrous consequences. So can you expand on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, the thing is, the legislature is only the law-making body.
Correct.
Laws are always implemented by various government officials on the ground. And then there is a huge opportunity for misinterpretation, for willful mismanagement, for inefficiencies, etc., etc. So we have laws against rape, and but Nirbhaya still happened. We have laws against murder, but murder still happened. So what I'm really scared of is, the government might have whatever intent, but the huge gap or loophole that they're creating is for errant officers to actually come in and make a big mess out of it. As we chat in this conversation, we'll talk about the CAG and the High Court and the Supreme Court, which incidentally Sai Deepak was a part of, where officers have really messed around with the authority that's been given to them. And the courts have had to step in to say that to protect our temples from our officials, which is sad and puzzling and demotivating at the same time.
No, I find it incredible. It's like when you said saving our gods, I never knew the underlying thing would be saving our gods from ourselves. So
Oh, absolutely.
it's the sad truth. So Sai, I want to come to you on this because Anurag said you're already involved on the legal side of things with the Indic Collective and stuff. If this bill is passed, is there any way this can be challenged in court and stuff?
See, the thing is,
And I'm assuming the worst, by the way. That the
right,
bill,
right, right.
the bill is passed, and what do we do after that? Because India में काफी ये होता है कि भाई हो गया, अब क्या करेंगे?
Right. That's true. That's the Rudali Vilas we always do after the horse. Yeah. No, that's what always happens. After the horses have bolted from the stables is when we truly realize the impact of what is happening. And in this case, fortunately, I think all credit must go to Anurag, because the fact that such a bill had been floated and comments had been invited is something that I was not even aware of, to be very, very honest. So he was the one to actually flag it to my attention. And after I read it, as someone who has lesser experience compared to him when it comes to dealing with murtis and stuff, I myself was shocked at the kind of provisions that were to be found in the proposed legislation. Of course, it can be challenged, but you have to understand, a challenge to a legislation can be only if it's discriminatory and if it does something to violate your fundamental rights, so to speak. However, let's say if there are two ways of achieving a certain object, and one government chooses path A, the other government chooses path B. Merely because you have a problem with path B, that doesn't make the legislation vulnerable to a legal challenge or a constitutional challenge. Okay? Because at the end of the day, it's a question of vision, it's a question of executive policy, and it's a question of what a certain government chooses to do to tackle a certain issue. So unless and until if you're able to put your finger on the legislation and say that this is the legal perversity or constitutional perversity in the legislation, challenge is something that's very, very difficult to pass muster. Okay. Now let's look at it this way. A 1972 legislation, merely because this legislation is worse than the earlier legislation, that doesn't make it amenable to a challenge. Okay. So, which is why it's important to immediately object to it at this particular instance before this fructifies and crystallizes into an act or a statute, so to speak, in the statute books. Okay, so I hope that answers the question.
So absolutely, and now I'm going to bring in Sunanda in a second before I come to you, Anurag, just because she wanted to make an initial comments, and then we can open up the floor for a debate. Sunanda, any initial comments you had?
No, I was horrified when I heard, and as Sai rightly said, thanks to Anurag for bringing it to our notice. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. My question is, Anurag, whether, if you can help us understand, people like me who don't understand this very well, and the vast majority out there who may not be able to help, not because they don't want to, but because they're not aware. I put myself in this category. So when did this bill, who put in this bill? I mean, where did it come from? Were there any lobbyists who were lobbying for this? There has to be a root cause. Why is this bill needed at this point? Who is lobbying for it? What is this something that you're already doing with the campaign that is bothering them? What is going on? Have you tried to go to the bottom of this?
So, well, I can only make intelligent guesses. Well, if you ask my wife, she'll say I can only make guesses, but I'm being charitable to myself and saying I can make intelligent guesses. But on a serious note, I think there are a couple of facts for us to note. One is the heritage lobby is actually a very, very, very powerful lobby, just because of the kind of money that is involved. Last year in the US, in New York, the Homeland Security guys raided one dealer in one city on one day, and they found, I think, $106 million worth of stolen Indian heritage.
Wow.
Right, so let's think about that for a second. $106 million essentially in one set of raids on one day on one dealer. So you must understand, these guys have a whole bunch of money behind them, and money brings you a lot of a lot of media that will talk about you, and a lot of lawyers and art experts and curators and whatever. So we know that is happening, right? The fact that publications like The Print could go out and do a hatchet job on the kind of work we are doing talks about the fact that we as an organization or as a community are threatening them. B, which is I think a little more interesting aspect is, Modi ji is the first prime minister in independent history to have taken a personal interest in this subject. And now let's move away from heritage and this and that to the whole idea of soft power. Modi ji, as you know, has personally taken back stolen Indian murtis from Germany, from Australia, from the US, and a whole bunch of countries. Now, just the image of Angela Merkel going up on stage and giving back stolen Indian heritage that was sold through these channels and art houses and
it was a huge moment.
Houses and whatever. It's a huge moment in terms of soft power. Now that obviously is troubling quite a few people. So I can see why people with a criminal intent towards our heritage can view this as an existential threat to them.
Yeah. I want to ask a question to Sai. Sai, can you break down the legalese for common people, for ordinary people who don't understand this language? What does this legislation really mean? Give me an example in real sense. What will this legislation mean?
Right.
In day-to-day life.
In day-to-day life, what it means is the commoditization of heritage or murtis is made easier through this legislation, and therefore for me it is an instrumentality of facilitation of commerce in heritage. That for me is the broad soundbite that I would put out with respect to the legislation if I had to capture it in a sentence. Okay, see, it's like this. As opposed to having a stringent mechanism where you have to justify having access to treasures which are meant for public domain or which are meant to be in public domain, and also for you to be able to trade in them and to have stringent measures for it, it takes for granted and it makes this the new normal. Commoditization and sale of heritage has become the new normal thanks to the proposed bill. Okay. Now, please understand that whenever you're looking at a bill or a statute such as this, you're effectively looking at the intent of the legislature to put it in legal terms. Therefore, the problem is the intention behind the legislature itself, and all these provisions reflect that particular intention in nuts and bolts. Okay, I'll give you one more thing, and I'm just building on what Anuraag mentioned. See, shock the conscience of an ordinary person when he's faced with this kind of issue. This is not a day-to-day issue. It is not a run-of-the-mill issue. Therefore, for all practical purposes, this cost could be reduced to a storm in a teacup for most people. Okay. Apart from elite circles, people may not have interest. But look at the figures: 106 million from one raid. The kind of money going into the hands of anti-Indian elements and anti-Indic elements. Okay. Therefore, fortunately or unfortunately, the nexus that the United States security resolutions have drawn between trade in antiquities and terror, for me, now brings this particular issue to center stage, because this means this has become one of those softer means of gaining money and financing terror. So unfortunately, there's a link between the two, but fortunately, the link exists so that people start taking this issue seriously. Okay. Otherwise, heritage as an issue can be treated as an elitist issue, and people beyond, let's say, a certain limited circle may not be interested in it at all. So to find people to actually create a ruckus about it or even to have a dharna about it may be very, very difficult. Therefore, the fact that trade in this particular aspect of, let's say, heritage leading to financing terror makes it more mainstream as far as I'm concerned. Okay. And despite this nexus having been acknowledged by international institutions, for the Indian legislature to propose a certain piece of legislation that normalizes sale in heritage or trade in heritage, for me is deeply disturbing and concerning.
I agree. And Anurag, actually, you brought this up also when we were doing the podcast, that about the trading in heritage leads to the national security component. And if not for the historical context, this is another reason, also for the governments to take this into account. But what I want to bring you, and I'm going to come to you in a second, is what is the outlook, or what is the thinking that has gone behind this bill? Say, is it that okay, in present this government, it gives liberty to a government to do this, but they have not thought in future 5 years down the lane, or 10 years or 15 years, when a political party not amenable to the same ideology as Mr. Modi comes to power, or if it comes to power, they might misuse it? Do you think that thinking has not gone into place when they did this legislation?
To me, honestly, that thinking is irrelevant, because it is not about politics at all. Issues of national pride and...
I'm talking about somebody who's not as passionate about this. The reason why
Understood.
Yeah.
And I'm coming to that, right? I wouldn't want to speculate what is going on in anybody's mind, and so I don't want to go down that path here. Ye log soch kya rahe, right? Because that unfortunately gives you very depressing answers. The bigger gripe that I have is it's not about the political leanings of the current government, and whether the current government is being able to manage what clearly seems to be an output from the babudam of Lutyens. The bigger gripe which nobody is getting, and I just kind of want to expand on Sai Deepak's point there, is, couple of years back, the United Nations Security Council has said that ISIS has 6 sources of funding, right? Like they deal in drugs, like they deal in sex slaves, they also deal in stolen heritage, right? We are seeing so much evidence of that. We have countries like, so let's take a couple of examples, where you are. The US has passed legislation to factor in this new learning. China, who's actually a communist government and don't believe in religion, has brought in new legislation to manage theirs. A friendly neighbor, Pakistan, has gone ahead and introduced the KP Antiquities Bill. So, you can see the US and Pakistan and China trying to do stuff to protect their heritage. And as Sai Deepak said, then you have the Indian government, which is saying, okay, let's find a way to sell our heritage. Now, and now I have you asking me, what are they thinking? And, that's my question back to you. What the heck are they thinking?
Exactly.
For us to be worse off than Pakistan as an Indian is it's a very depressing moment for me.
Very, very interesting point. And in fact, what you talk about antiquities, I was reading Dan Brown's Origin, the new book that just came out, and he actually mentions things about that also, because he was talking about the old Iraqi empire and stuff in the 9th century. Again, the context is completely different, but what I'm saying is that is a passionate topic also. And yesterday, actually, I was at a party and I was talking to someone, and we were just debating about the antiquities, and I mentioned our hangout, and they're like, they were Indian, and they were like, they had no idea that something like this was being in works. Now, they did know about the smuggling that used to happen, and the high profile cases, the Subhash Kapoors of the world and so forth.
Sure.
So but they did not know the small specifics that were happening, and that was that I thought was very intriguing. And do you think this also, it's incumbent on people like us who are raising awareness, is to break it down into smaller components so people get more aware of this also on the ground? What do you think, Sai?
See, I think that's one of the reasons, and perhaps I can take the liberty of making this public. So when Anuraag and I were working on the piece, considering that I come with my training as a lawyer, I have a tendency to immediately get into the analysis of the provisions. But the thing was to actually put out the big picture consequence for the general audience to understand, and make it more lucid for them to understand what does it translate to them in terms of heritage consequences and real world, or let's say real time consequences from a national security standpoint.
Yeah.
So that is the sense in which that particular article was actually crafted and drafted, if I may put it in that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there's one more thing. Please understand that at least maybe a decade ago, this concept of inviting comments from stakeholders with respect to a proposed legislation was an aberration and not the norm. Okay. At least for the last 10 years, that has become the norm.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what more do you expect a government to do apart from putting out this particular piece of proposed legislation for people's comments, right? Now, I can blame the government for the intention that you can discern from the document. But even then, they have exposed themselves to public scrutiny and criticism and feedback before that legislation comes into force. Okay. After that, it is for people to read up and then comment. It just happens that we are fortunate and lucky to have people like Anuraag who have a serious interest in this, who have committed themselves to this particular cause. And I think they've been working on this for over a decade. And that's the reason why the rest of us know about it. And the rest of us who are actually committed to Indian causes, even most of us don't know about it. And look at the level of, let's say, knowledge in that particular sense. If people like us who are committed to Indian causes are not aware of it, the expectation that it percolates to the common man or the Aam Aadmi, so to speak, the mango person, I think is a bit too much. And let's also be realistic. Such causes don't necessarily find traction at all levels. And that is the fate of such causes. Okay? Be that as it may, I don't think that should stop us from taking up these causes or being pessimistic about it. Some causes will never find mass traction.
I agree with you.
So we have to deal it that way.
No, I agree with you. And the fact that a cause doesn't find mass traction doesn't make it an illegitimate cause to take up. In fact, more reason for us to take it up because 10,000 other people are not taking it up. So, agar wo log sab, they talk about others, who's going to take up this? So, although I hope RTE falls into that ambit also, but I'm not going there. It's going to open another can of worms. So, Sunanda, you were making a point. Then I'm coming to you in a second.
No, I wanted to make a quick point here. We have talked about it. I want to talk about the nuts and bolts, nitty-gritties of it. So, you have this thunderclap, petition going. I am personally not a big fan of petitions because I haven't seen them working,
So
really.
On a lighter note, I thought Thunderclap was Arnab Goswami's pseudonym. So we've used Thunderclap also, but I just had to make that joke. Anyways, go on.
So I just wanted to know that other than this petition, what can people do? How can they help? And once you get a required number of signatures on this petition, what are you expecting to do? I'm just talking about the nuts and bolts here now. What is the tangible things that people can do?
I think this ties into a couple of things. A couple of things that were said here. To Sai Deepak's and Adit's point, I don't blame anybody. Because you don't know about this issue. So I know from a media perspective, we've been met by death by silence, which is the simplest strategy that's been followed by the whole leftist circuit for a while now. So, A, we have to recognize that that's a fact we're dealing with. B, we have to recognize that you have platforms like MyInd and a whole bunch of other new and emerging platforms that are willing to say the stuff that traditional mainstream media won't. So, thanks for being, for holding that flag for us. Now, when it comes to how can people help, we've stayed away from traditional petitions because, there's a very high likelihood that it lands in a dustbin. The Thunderclap campaign is a little different from, a change.org kind of a campaign because it creates enough traction on social media, which then gets amplified and discussed and debated. Versus a singular interaction with the campaign that, yes, I support. A Thunderclap campaign leads to a dialogue which the government can be a part of the minute they realize that, hey, this matters to, so many thousand Indians, so it should matter to us. B, I would say, just search for more information and start making noise at your own level because, back to what Sai Deepak just said, the unfortunate part is, as much as this is one of the few issues that A, ties into national pride, B, ties into national security, and C, has a lot of potential to be undebatable. As leftist as one is, he cannot stand up and say, look here, India's heritage should not come back to India, right? despite all of this, there are people who don't know enough about this issue and aren't talking enough about it.
And let's face it, and I'm being very pragmatic, I'm playing the devil's advocate here. If you're talking from a lot of people get their news, as much as we don't like that, but get it from the 9 p.m. primetime debates or the news bulletins, and saying that India ne Pakistan ko karara jawab diya is quote unquote a sexier news item than saying that let's debate the nitty-gritties of the law that might take away your murtis. But when you break it down into simple thing, okay, you know the temple you were praying and you have been believing in it for 200 years, your families, the government has the right to, not the government, but koi bhi aake wo murti utha ke leke ja sakta hai, saying that, you know, kahan se aayi ye stuff. That will resonate more. Just simplifying it.
Not just लेके जा सकता है, उसको बेच के बम खरीद के आप पे वापस फेंकने वाला है.
वापस.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
That is the bigger angle which people just seem to ignore, despite whatever we are seeing in Bengal and Kerala today.
Yeah.
So that's something that, and that's what I realized when I was interacting with a lot of people, because they were like getting bored if I was talking about a larger issue, but then I broke it down into specific segments of say five places that you know, they relate to a small thing. They're like, oh man, this could be dangerous. I was like, exactly. So
may I just make
you know,
a point?
the guy that was arrested for.
Yeah.
Sorry, just as a side anecdote. You know, where people think it's a small issue, but the criminals themselves don't. The guy whose family was engaged in this trade, a guy called Deen Dayalan, who's 80 something, he and his grandson were arrested and placed in jail. Now, you know, murti ka chori koi aisa crime nahi hai, unlike let's say a rape or forgery or whatever, jo bahut sharam varam ki baat hai. But the grandson committed suicide in jail. Right?
Wow.
And still and I think he was, you know, in his late 20s or early 30s.
Wow.
And nobody's asking the question, ki boss, why, you know, where were the tentacles? What was the risk? Who was he dealing with? Which pushed him to something as serious as committing suicide.
Correct.
You know, and that's something people are not realizing, ki boss, ye criminal nexus itna deep hai, ki, you know, ki people are more scared of people, you know, of the criminals they're dealing with than of a legal process.
Right. No, absolutely. Sai, you were wanting to make a point.
See, on how do you explain this, or let's say, how do you get traction through mainstream media? I just have some points to make based on the experience that I've had. So, for instance, there is this program called The Big Picture on Rajya Sabha TV.
Yes.
Usually takes up those causes or those issues which you don't find even a Republican anybody else doing, and it does a great amount of justice and a fair amount of justice to those issues in understanding the nuances of it. And having been a part of those panel discussions, I can say one thing for a fact, that there is a huge audience, okay, for such programs, especially among civil service aspirants, okay, who watch them. Let me put it this way. You have 1,000 different people coming from semi-urban areas or rural areas who may not have too much to contribute to the issue, or who may not have too much of an interest in this particular issue. Compare that with 25 civil service aspirants who are committed to that particular issue, who can understand it and who wish to make their voice heard. Which of these two would you target as an audience? I would go with the latter. Okay, and let's go to the other issue, which is this. I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of social media as on date, because I think a smartly marketed YouTube video or a podcast has a greater chance of reaching out to a wider section of people as opposed to a news program on a mainstream channel sometimes. Okay. That's one. 3, if I get 5 top artists and cars to speak on this particular issue and write representations to the government, that's going to count for much more than 1 lakh signatures of average people who have not contributed to the piece of art and who have no standing as far as the art scene is concerned.
Correct.
Okay, so who says it and who ventilates it also makes a lot of difference. Right. So what I think perhaps could be a next step, and that's something that we could mull over, is to identify who can stand up and actually speak to the government and say, this is our concern with respect to this legislation. And they ask for an appointment with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Culture and say that this is the delegation that all of us have come together, and here is a representation. Kindly look into this. That will be, I think, perhaps the best way, or that's one of the best ways to actually put this message out in public domain. And when those people say it, they are equally intellectuals in their space, right? You can't actually ignore their voices. So that's something that we can certainly look at.
No, and something that
what is important is a lot of people should first know of this issue, and then we go to the next level.
Absolutely. No, something that people who are watching this debate can also do is write to the Ministry of Culture, whether it impacts or not. Keep writing and send the link to this debate. What we have been talking about and stuff. Make more. The more we do it, the better it is. That way. And what I would also like to say, this is not just an Indian issue, as in it's not just limited to India. It's an Indic issue. So Indians living outside India, like all of us, relate to it just as much, because like you said, Anuraag, अगर मूर्ति चोरी हो गई, आधी मूर्ति यहीं पे बिकने आती है.
Can I just make one point? I'll just make one point. So sorry for making this.
No,
Anuraag made the point about Pakistan actually being 2 steps ahead of us when it comes to this. Okay. And here's where you can actually expose the duplicity of that country and our own stupidity in a very different way. They realize that even though they may want to deny the Indic roots of Pakistan and the fact that it was part of the Indian subcontinent and the Indic subcontinent, the reason that they may want to protect that particular heritage is it translates to tangible money in terms of tourism. Okay?
Yeah.
And actually reaching out to tourist guide associations and telling them that the government is proposing to do this. Okay? And this could have a bearing on your livelihood. If you have nothing to showcase and show when a foreigner comes to this country, how will you earn your livelihood if you're actually a tourist operator or a tour operator?
Yes, absolutely.
So perhaps that is one, let's say, audience which you can tap and hope to actually escalate their voices in a concrete and comprehensive fashion to the Ministry of Culture. That's something that can be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anuraag, you were trying to say something, and then I'm going to go to Sunanda and we'll go for closing comments. So yeah, Anuraag.
Oh, no, I was just, you mentioned the whole NRI angle, people who are still interested in, an Indic topic. And it an incident just came back to my mind around why, I'm an NRI myself. I live in Singapore. I was in London last year speaking at a university conference on this subject. And it was very interesting. It was interesting because everyone else, from Belgium and Germany and the Interpol and this and that was a government representative, except for India. And at the end of my talk, a gentleman actually stood up, raised his hand and asked me this question, saying that, hey, listen, whenever we go to India, we don't go there to check out, a national park or a building or anything modern, right? We go to India for its temples and for the Qutub Minar and for, Bhubaneswara and Banaras and whatever. And don't you think it's kind of weird that we respect your heritage more than you do?
Correct.
And it shook me from the inside, saying, hey, listen, this is an impression that that a pro-India foreigner carries. And I think it's just so much more. I mean, there's a tourism angle and there is the Pakistan angle and this and that. Bottom line is, we just need to stand up and realize that this is something that we should not, just let pass under our noses. And that's basically it.
I agree, completely agree. And what you said, as much as it stings, we should actually go back and reflect on ourselves that why have we come to a point where a person, a foreigner can actually tell you that, कुछ तो थोड़ी बहुत सच्चाई होगी इसमें कि we are not taking it, and maybe not us, but people before us have not taken. I don't know, but थोड़ी बहुत तो सच्चाई है. So let's ponder over that also. So Sunanda, we're getting to that time. We're almost hitting an hour. So I'm going to start with you, and then we can wrap up with closing comments.
No, I have a question actually.
Oh, please.
Has any Anuraag and Sai both, has any channel been opened with the Ministry of Culture by you guys? Have you tried? Is there a possibility of opening a direct channel? Or are you hoping that there will be a crowd splurge and one day they will hear?
Well, so I'm going to be very blunt here because it's the middle of the night and I have no reason to be otherwise. We've had meetings with them in the past. We've presented at their conferences. We've given data. And I don't want to make it an us versus them kind of a thing because the Comptroller and Auditor General, as well as the Madras High Court, as well as the Supreme Court, have said what I am. That, the words that the CAG used was that the ministry and the ASI were utterly incompetent. And utterly incompetent are their words, not ours. So there's very limited traction you can get with somebody, that's just showing no interest whatsoever in the subject. And I apologize if I'm being overly cynical.
No. I asked the reason. I asked the question for a particular reason, because I want people to know if there is apathy on the other side, then we need to focus on that. I do not believe in any sugarcoating.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, the kind of stuff, and to make it a little more factual, the kind of stuff that really offends me. In the same time that Italy went and recovered about 500,000 pieces of stolen heritage, in the same time that Saudi Arabia recovered 52,000 pieces of stolen heritage, India recovered 27 pieces.
Wow.
Okay, let me repeat that again. Right, we're talking of, both these countries above 50,000, and pick up any country at random, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In that same time frame, we bring back 27. Last year, the US offered back 200 murtis to Modi ji when he was in Washington. And then we have a situation where only 11 of them have come back into India over a year. So it just puzzles me how Modi ji
if there is bureaucratic apathy, if there is any political apathy, it needs to be addressed now, because nothing can be bigger than our heritage, nothing is bigger than our story, because this is our story. What people forget is that our heritage is our story. So I keep saying this, you erase our heritage, you erase our history, you erase us.
The Minister of Culture is, I think, Mr. Mahesh Sharma. So I want to tell everyone who strongly feels about it, tweet to him, talk to him, share the articles that Sai and Anurag have written, share this debate. But I want more people to talk this up, because if people like me and you and people watching, we don't take it up, this is going to die down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just one important component or link here.
One at a time. Sai, you first.
Yeah, see, this is just one important angle, and which ties into the larger temple freedom issue, and I think which is an extremely important issue. See, who are the dramatis personae, the key players here? And it goes back to the same rogue department of HRC department, the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Department. And you just need to read the judgment of the Madras High Court, especially Justice Mahadevan.
We had a little bit of an audio mishap with Sai. So Anurag, if you want to make your point till he comes back on.
Well, no, so let me just continue on Sai's point. So, there's a judgment from the Madras High Court, 21st of July, 12060. You guys should just pick it up and read it. It is, it is an indictment of these guys in such a bad way, it is unimaginable. Police officers have been stealing away. There was a police officer called Kadar Basha who was stealing these murtis away and selling them off. And the Tamil Nadu government decided to do nothing about it, right? And the ASI in the center decided to do nothing about it. So, you must read up that judgment.
Hello?
Sorry, Sai, you're back. So I was just mentioning Kadar Basha. You want to take it up from here, Sai?
I the connection. So the point I was making is police official was found to be hand in glove with smugglers of murtis.
Yeah.
Okay, and the Madras High Court, God bless the court for actually coming out of the judgment, finally recognizing the kind of devastation and havoc the HRC department has wreaked. So apart from the issue of looting the resources which are connected to the temple in terms of its landed property, in terms of the money that comes into it, there's also the issue of looting of murtis that happens, where you have state officials, right from police officials to HRC department officials, who are hand in glove, who are in cahoots with the crooks. So forget the average citizen taking an interest in it. Those who are supposed to be guardians of our heritage are themselves actively hand in glove with the looters. Okay, so this is something that perhaps could actually help us mainstream the issue. That temple freedom is needed not just for protection of our resources in that sense, but also the resources of the temple itself. So this is something that needs to be understood. I would actually strongly recommend that apart from the article that both of us have written, I would recommend people to read up the judgment, because the language that has been used is stinging, scathing, castigating, and whatnot. And the right under Article 2549 have been concretely used by the court. And since I was involved in arguments at the Supreme Court stage and finally the Madras High Court's judgment, I'm happy to say that we delivered the goods on that particular front. But here's something that you need to understand.
Yeah.
Who was taking this issue seriously and who was diligently prosecuting the cases of temple theft was sought to be transferred. And who was responsible for it? Who were the powers be behind it? And whose vested interest was being served? That's for people to ask.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what Sai Deepak said was another point that I would like to make, and then we are going to go to closing comments, is that the law is to safeguard against the smugglers and so forth. But if the people who are protecting the law are misusing it, are there any safeguards in the bill or so forth to protect against the people who are misusing it? I know it sounds
none
like
whatsoever.
Yeah, I know. So
None.
I know it looks like I'm speaking in a loop, but that's the reality of the times we live in, you know. And that's what we. So before I come to Sunanda, Anuraag, your closing comments on this, and what would you like people to do in 30 seconds?
Well, it's very, very simple. If you don't care about either your heritage or your security, then you should not expect the government to do that instead of you. So the only thing you need to do is go out, find ways to let people know that you support the Save Our Gods campaign, right?
Absolutely.
Let people know that this matters to you when you cast your vote. This matters to you when you look at the central government and what they're doing, what they're not doing. And like I said, remember, this is the hashtag ka zamana. This is, where outrage is responded to. So if you feel, if you agree with what the four of us have been talking about, then go ahead, click on the campaign. Even after the campaign is done, doesn't matter. Keep sending your messages to Mahesh Sharma ji, keep tagging Narendra Modi ji, and says कि भाई साहब ये हो क्या रहा है, बस हमारी मूर्तियां बेच के हम ही पे बॉम्ब फेंके जा रहे हैं, और आप जो हो बोल रहे हो कि हाँ जी मूर्तियों को और बेचते हैं. This is, just let them know that you don't want to live with the ridiculousness, and that's about it.
And let's put it this way. I mean, if people who are listening, if this isn't outrage worthy enough, I'm going to put flames like Arnab does and says this is the burning question of the day. Please vote. I'll raise my voice and do that in the next. So, because it's very passionate to all of us, and I mean, please let us know if our debate was too civilized. We'll make it uncivilized next time and shout over it. If that gives you more attention. So Nanda, your closing comments, and then I'm going to sign.
The last part of this conversation reminds me of this line that I would often say. I used to say it in context of Kashmir from where I am, but this is truly the apathy that we are dealing with is true for this story as well. Mera qatil hi mera munsif hai, kya mere haq mein faisla dega? My killer is my judge. What will he give? This thing. How can I expect a favorable verdict in my favor? This one particular petition aside, this one particular legislation aside, there is a bigger problem. The fox has been made in charge of a chicken coop. So there is nothing we can do about it unless there is that systemic change, and unless there is that complete bureaucratic apathy is changed. Right. So guys, whoever is listening to this, and I hope more and more people listen, and I hope this happens, the first step you can do is work on this legislation. We can only go one step at a time. So it's all right to go and sit in your living rooms and talk big things and say we are going to do this and we are going to do that, but when it really comes down to hell, nothing really happens. You go back to your own lives like we all do. So here is Anuraag doing this fabulous job. Here is Sai doing this fabulous job. Strengthen their hands, strengthen them, do as much as you can. And all of us have this wonderful tool called social media. Let us for once outrage for the right reasons.
I was praying. I was like, Surendra, don't give another metaphor. Otherwise, लोग पूछने लगेंगे कि fox, chicken, कौन क्या है इसमें and all that. So I was like,
मतलब समझने वाले समझ गए हैं, ना समझे हुआ नाड़ी है.
So Sai, before we come to the closing comments, on a lighter note, see, we've all missed Virat Kohli's batting for this. Tells you how committed we are for this.
I'm anyway not a great fan of cricket, yeah.
That makes two of us.
अभी मत बोलो. I was just building up the narrative.
और तुम एंटी नेशनल हो गए यार, एकदम से एंटी नेशनल कमेंट मार दिया तुमने.
See,
how dare you? I'm kidding.
So I just have 2 lines to make, just 2 statements in fact. It wants to take over our temples and it wants the traders to take over our murtis. Look at the contrast. जहाँ पे फ्री करना है मंदिरों को, वहां पे नहीं कर रहे हैं, और जहां पे उनको एक्चुअली रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लेनी चाहिए, एंटिक्विटीज को बचाना है, वहां पे वो सबको दे रहे, आ जाओ, ले लो, लूट लो. Okay, look at the contrast. Okay, so I think we can give as many facts, statistics, figures. I think in this day and age of Google, anybody can have access to it. But is that going to change the attitude? I hope it does. If ignorance was the reason that people were apathetic towards it, let's hope that we are contributing to killing that apathy by giving them the facts they need to form an opinion. But if facts still don't make a difference, God save this country.
No, I pray and I hope that ignorance was the only reason that people were apathetic towards it, because that is something we can shed light on. But if it was complete, I don't know, apathy towards the cause,
indifference, it really does make a difference.
Indifference itself, then we live in strange times, I guess. And exactly. Well, let's hope we have our own avatar saving us. So, fingers crossed on that. Anuraag and Sai, thank you so much for coming on the Mind Debates. This was more of a mind discussion than Mind Debates, but such is the format we have. But and I'm glad. I hope we were able to make a difference with this. We will continue to support your cause in any which way we can. And I urge everyone listening to this, looking at this, listening to us, after you're done listening to the debate, please click. I mean, they have tweeted the Thunderclamp link. It's on our timelines also. Please go click on it, read their articles, and find out what is going to happen and what might happen if this.
With this, if you could tell tell your technical team that they should attach the link to the petition with this.
I will, in the YouTube description of this, where we write the podcast, the debate description, we will also give the Thunderclap link of the petition. So you should be able to just click and go straight from the YouTube page. So please do so, and support Save Our Gods, support India Pride Project, Indic Collective, and a little bit of self-pat. Also support Mind Makers. We're going to try and get more of these stories on Mind Makers, and we're going to get them on more podcasts and more debates. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back with the new edition of Mind Debates. Till then, from Adit and Sunanda and the Mind Makers team, goodbye.